Okay, good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube, Just Daf It. Today's Daf is Kesubos Nun Ches, number 58. I want to talk in the beginning of Daf Nun Ches Ben Aleph, where we had a machlokes in the Mishnah. We talked from Rabbi Akiva. According to the Mishnah Rishona, once 12 months elapse after they circle a wedding date, the woman is entitled to be fed from the husband, as long, even if they didn't get married. What do you have to give her? So, according to the Tarfin, you can give her entirely truma. She's marrying a Kohen, right? So once you're married to a Kohen, you're allowed to eat truma. The Gemara discusses she might also be a Bas Kohen, right, where she's already eating truma in her father's house. And then, that's according to Tarfa. You can give her entirely truma for her mizonos, whatever she needs. And according to Rabbi Akiva, you have to give her mechsa chul and mechsa truma. So the Gemara says there's two caveats, or Tarfon's, he's pretty machmir for the woman that she has. Truma is worth less. Also has to be eaten betara when you're tohar, not when you're tameya. So that's part of the reason why it's worth less. Also only eligible eaten by kohanim. So it has lesser value. So Tarfon has a kula for the husband. He says it only applies in two cases. It only applies when the Kohen is marrying someone who's from the family of a Kohen, who's a Bas Kohen. He marries a Bas Kohen where she's familiar already with truma. She's familiar with truma. She's able to keep it betara. She knows how to make her keep herself taller. She could always eat truma. Therefore, you give her entirely truma. However, if she's a Bas Yisrael, she's not familiar with it, so you have to give her. He agrees with Rabbi Akiva. You have to give her mechsa chol and mechsa truma, because at least half of the time when she's tmeya, she could eat the chulin. And the Gemara Abai says another caveat in Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon would also agree that you give her mechsa chul and mechsa truma if she's nesua, once she's married. Once she's married, now you have to give her mizonos. You have to feed your wife. So when you feed your wife, you can't entirely give her truma. You have to give her half truma, half chulin. However, in Arusa, once there's no nisuin yet, she's not nechsal chuppah. There's no nisuin. So then you can get away with giving. Tarfon says you can give her entirely truma. Now Rashi says, what's the reason for this distinction? He says, Barusa, the reason Arusa you can give her entirely truma. The whole of Yehiva Beis Avia, since she's in her father's house, Tarach Avia Limkor Truma B'chulin, Limei Tuma Lefish Hu Ragel B'kach, right? She might become Tmeya, but she has a father who is taking care of her, right? She's still in her father's house. She's still in the rishus of her father. We'll go to the marketplace and ensure that he's able to get the best market value for whatever truma. Obviously, truma is worth less, but he can give the best market value. Rashi says Shenosin La Bailam Mazonas of Beisa could go on Masha Isha Ide Shlish. Does not Masisa Mechsa Chulin and Fish Kol Kfuda Bas Melech Panima. He says, Rashi says the Nesua is not every case where he's married. If she's married and the husband's around, obviously the husband can go to the marketplace and sell, if she's Tmeya, and sell the Truma for Chulin, and can be an advocate for her. However, it's talking about a unique case, and Samach Dalet Amabez and Mishnah, where the husband went away. He went overseas for business, and he set aside some money for her mizonos. So there's no one to advocate for her. So therefore, he has to give her mechsa chulin and mechsa truma only in that case, right? Even the Gemara doesn't say it. The Gemara says in the Sua, all cases where she's married, usually the husband's home. It's interesting that Rashi says we're talking about a case of Masha Ishali Shlish. He set aside some money. He goes overseas for half a year in business. That's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara doesn't say that. So I'd like to offer a different explanation over here, based on what we've been saying until now, that from the Eriston, right, does the husband have the obligation to give his wife food from the Eriston or not? So we learned that when you get married to a woman, when you get Mekadesh to a woman, right, just like an Amma Ivriya, Sherak Tzuzav and Asalo Yigra, an Amma Ivriya, right, she becomes an Amma Ivriya through Kesef, right? Kiddushin is also Kesef. Kiddushin, Eriston is enough to be makna her Sherak Tzuzav Anasa, and Shera is food. But that's Midoraisa or Mizonos are the bare minimum in order that she shouldn't starve to death. He has to provide her bread, maybe some salt, and some water. Mayim Sruh Tishta. Pasmelach Tochal. Al Ar Tishan. He tells his wife, you sleep on the ground. I'm going to give you a bottle of water, a pitcher of water, maybe a cup of water for the whole day. I'll give you one piece of bread, 1 cup of water, and 1 tablespoon of salt. And you make it work. Technically, Midoraisa, that's all he's obligated. In the Gemara, Nun Gimel, Amin Aleph, Nun Gimel, Beis, where it talks about whether the likelihood that the Arus will provide mizonas for her, the Gemara says it's likely that he will, right? Because he doesn't want her to be disgraced. What's that talking about? That's talking about the mizonos of marriage and the Su and the Ksuva. The Chazal Masakim Darabana mizonos that he has to provide day sipu kaichi, mizonos kaichi, whatever she likes, right? Ola imo b'eni redis imo. If she was accustomed in her wealthy father's house to have steak every night, or his house, he comes from a rich house. Either way, she gets the best of both worlds. So that mazonas that she gets is a higher standard. What she really wants to eat, what she really likes to eat, a real grocery bill. That is only comes in when the ksuva comes into effect. When I explain the ksuva only comes into effect, b'shas nisuin, when there's chuppah haroy labia. I explained yesterday. Chuppah haroy labia, then the nisuin kicks in. Nisuin is carrying over the threshold of the door into your canopy bed, which is the chuppah. So nisuin basically is chuppah. So when you have that, so that's when the takana midrabanan of mizonos, the mizonos drabanan, which is provide everything she wants and needs, more than just the bare minimum, that comes into effect. So that, I think, is the explanation over here. When she's an arusa, right? So Kinyan Kaspel, he owns her, and he can feed her truma, and he has a chiv to give mizonos to her. Midin sheira. So his hand is on top. Yado el Yona. Tough luck. I can give you all truma, like Ritarfon does. I give you all truma. I don't have to worry about you. You go and figure out how to get money for it. If you're Tmeya, you're a Bas Yisrael, you don't know how to be Shomer yourself in Tara, or you're Tmeya and you can't use it, go sell it in the marketplace. Take care of yourself. However, once she's Nesua, so therefore he has to take into account a higher level of living. She has to live on his level of livelihood, of food. Right, her parnasa, her clothing, her food has to be on a higher standard. It has to be a normal standard for her society, for her stature. And being that's the case, therefore you have to provide half chulin and half truma. You don't have to provide entirely chulin, because she's smart enough to know when she's tahora, she'll eat the truma. She could eat it. She's now married to a kohen. Even if she's a Bas Yisrael, she's married to a kohen. She's allowed to eat truma. She'll eat it. It won't be made tara. When she's tmeya, she'll have what to eat in chulin. So you have to make sure she feels comfortable. You can't force her into a tough situation. She's to go to the marketplace and she only has she's truma. She's losing money. We learned that when you have truma, you have to sell it for a lower price than chulin, because there's less of a demand for truma, because only kohanim could eat it. And you can only eat it. A kohanim could only eat it when they're in a state of tara. So it's worth less. You have to sell it for less. So therefore, he has to treat her nicer when he has nisuin, and because that's when the mizonot rabbanan takes in. Therefore, even when we talk from moda mechza chulin and mechza truma. Hope you enjoyed today's share. I believe that's the truth. See you in Daily Double Mishnah Yomi coming up next.